This episode is a paid partnership with Lexus.
For what I do, I love that I kind of dance within the phenomena of things expiring or coming to life or coming back to life.
I'm Sonia Manalili, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast by Artnet News. Land art, the movement which emerged in the 1960s and 70s, with artists such as Robert Smithson, Nancy Holt, and Michael Heizer erecting monumental works in far-flung destinations, is widely regarded for its engagement with the environment and its elements. These remarkable installations are crafted in concert with the earth, meant to evolve as sun, storms, and seasons weather them continuously over time. But what if you homed in on the core of this concept, creating sweeping land artworks in ways and places where they would be truly temporary, imprints made for a moment before disappearing back into the earth? This is the crux of California-based artist Jim Denevan's dynamic practice, which involves interacting with topographies and terrains to craft ephemeral compositions that play with the impermanence of our ever-changing world. Since the mid-1990s, Denevan has traversed the globe creating unfathomable, massive works in sand, earth, and ice, often using no more than a rake, stick, or even the soles of his feet. He has etched miles-long Fibonacci circles in Siberia's frozen Lake Baikal, drawn shore-spanning spirals in San Francisco's Ocean Beach, and sculpted concentric rings of sand mounds at international public art exhibitions Desert X Alula in Saudi Arabia and Manar Abu Dhabi. His work has been featured in institutional shows at MoMA PS1, the Peabody Essex Museum, and the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, as well as the Oscar-long-listed documentary Man in the Field, which explored Denevan's artistic career and his culinary trajectory as the founder of Outstanding in the Field, a roving restaurant set where food is sourced to connect diners with the origins of their meals. This spring, Artnet collaborated with Denevan on an original project, showcasing the all-new 2024 Lexus GX, alongside the artist bringing to life an incredible land artwork in Harper Lake, just north of Los Angeles. Taking the shape of the Universal Number 1, the more than quarter-mile piece is a dramatic testament to making the most of our time on the earth, but confidently pursuing our curiosities and drive for adventure. On a cool, bright morning in April, Denevan is diligently surveying the dry lake, his eyes trained from years spent surfing around the world to notice minute details like which way the waves are breaking or when the next set is rolling in. As the artist and his team mark the arid landscape to prepare for his colossal drawing, they assess the terrain's condition to determine their approach.
I do want to walk around for a long enough time to really get a feel for what the intangible aspect of the compositional space, like what does it feel like to be out here? Where are the mountains? Where's the sun coming up and going down? And I kind of don't want to know until I get a good look around. Process-wise, what's the instrument? The surface is extremely hard or is soft. I've done compositions where it was just my footsteps. It's also possible to just walk on a dry lake if it has enough moisture that just your footprints is the composition, which is pretty amazing to just walk out with nothing and come back with just the marks of footsteps. Maybe it's a stick or a hoe, or if it's extremely large space, a vehicle, which is pretty fun making those curves. It's very precise, the attention to the curves, to realize a composition many miles across. In some sense, it's all very simple. There's still an aspect of simplicity to it all from when I started.
The process of selecting the perfect location for each piece is as integral as the act of working with the materials themselves. With meticulous attention to detail, he considers the interplay between the vista, the light, and the elements.
Today we're in the California desert. Harper Dry Lake is the name of the location, maybe 2 hours from Los Angeles. This is an area of many dry lakes. They're the remains of a Pleistocene lakes, which were very large, and now with a different climate, they're what would be called seasonal lakes. They do have water in them, but quite rarely, and then it dries up. So interestingly, being in the desert, which is a really vast area, and knowing that there's 20 to 30 dry lakes here, the exploration is a big part of finding the right place to do this kind of artwork. And so at this point, maybe I've discovered and taken a look at maybe 10 or so of these dry lakes really, really closely. And then there's context. What are the mountains surrounding the lake and how that might affect the work? I'm always thinking beyond the aspect of the lake or the dry lake being a sheet of paper. You could consider it like, oh, this is just a white expanse of drawable space. I like considering in the context of where the mountains are. So that takes a bit of driving around to see what's the best vantage, and the position of the sun has a big part of it.
Having traversed the world for the sake of his art, Denevan has created pieces in numerous environments, ranging from expansive fields to frozen lakes and arid deserts. He recalls the first time that he created a piece in a dry lake.
I made a circle on a dry lake by hand. The dry lake was a half-mile across. First time I ever went to a dry lake. It was the closest dry lake to my house because I discovered, okay, I need to go to dry lake. I need to check out what that is because I'm used to surfaces that are not as big. And I headed out across. I guessed at the proper curve, and it's kind of a eyeballing it, but I've been going in circles for literally several years. And I was thinking, I'm going to go across this dry lake that's half-mile across, and I'm going to arrive at the same place. I think it was like 13 minutes later, I don't know, something like that. Went all the way around, came back and found the line that I started at and hit it. And I just couldn't believe it. That it was, I mean, sure, it was good, a lot of practice, but that it's possible to make compositions of that size by hand just by thinking about parallax and how the mountains move in the background and the curve, and you taking all the information, meditatively walking and coming to the same place. So that kind of like success creates an obsession, and then pretty soon we're sitting out on a strange dry lake, the desert in California, and thinking about giant numbers.
Denevan began creating works in the sand in 1994. His first piece was a 15-foot depiction of a fish drawn into the sand. He proceeded to adorn the entire beach with intricate drawings depicting a diverse array of subjects, including houses, people, dinosaurs, and clouds. All of this drawn with just his finger. It was at this pivotal moment that Denevan realized he had discovered the ideal medium for his artistic expression.
And the first time I did it, I covered the whole beach, and I was thinking, well, this is a medium that's like, there's a few historically, like John Miro, the artist, and there's a few artists that went out with a stick and drew in the sand. But as a practice, like Jan Dibbett's another person that did something, I think it was done with a machine, or Richard Longston. When I first drew a fish that's like 15 feet, and I mean, I immediately knew that figures and geometry and in terms of the range of things to do that, I can become interested in this or that and try that or this or consider this or that. So I was immediately thinking this is a really rich environment to explore, the possibility of a medium. And so the first day I actually drew with just my finger, I don't like the sort of caveman quality of it's like that you're come with nothing, leave with nothing. And I covered the whole beach, and I actually, from pushing my finger this way for a few hours, my finger, for 3 weeks, had a kind of a weird pain in it. So I got very into it from the very first time that I was like, okay, I'm just going to cover the whole beach. And I climbed the stairs to look at it from above. And a lot of drawing in the sand is when the sun's in the right direction. What you think of as being somewhat invisible is extremely present if the light source is in the right spot. So when I went to the top of the cliff, I knew I'd be devoting myself to this kind of art form for decades. I mean, it was totally clear to me.
Denevan's artistic process swiftly evolved, prompting him to experiment with an array of tools beyond the rudimentary stick or rake. The tools facilitated a greater fluidity in his artistic process, enabling him to seamlessly integrate with his compositions. He also established self-imposed guidelines that served as the foundation for developing the essential skills pivotal to his future work.
I did go from using my finger for a week or so to a short stick, which is kind of like a paintbrush, it's something like this. And then I figured out, okay, it's use a stick that's like a dance partner, in the sense stand up and basically just be really comfortable. and making the marks. And then, I went from the stick and then using a rake. And then like 20 years ago, I made a double rake welded together. So I had a wider line to make from walking along. So that's the evolution of the technical. And then I made rules for myself. There was no measuring. This is many years ago. So any circle was a freehand circle. So years and years of like making a semi quote unquote perfect circle. So like building skills like ice skaters.
In Denevan's artistic practice, the process of honing his skill set and crafting monumental scale pieces entails a significant physical undertaking. For certain works, he has traversed distances of up to 30 miles in a single day, amounting to approximately 7 to 8 hours of continuous movement. The manner in which his body navigates through the landscape becomes a component of the composition itself. The physicality serves as a source of profound joy in the creation of his work.
The act of composing, really, and moving, considering the overall composition, being a part of the whole, knowing what the whole is, and moving towards the goal of realizing the whole. Because what I do is so physical, has so much to do with using my body, back to the gross motor versus like the fine motor. It's not just my hand and my mind and the rectangle or the square. It's physically moving through space, more like, an ice skater or even like an athlete that's considering where the goalpost is and who they're going to tackle or who's going to try to tackle them on the way to the, to the goal. It's like nature and the physical aspect of space and the aspect of people being on the journey with me. I want to think those things are like super like central, but like they're secondary to being at one with the composition and its emergence of the composition. And being in the right place, if it's geometrical. My gait of walking has a different weight on my feet. So in my mind, I can see it perfect, but my body doesn't reach that perfection. And that distance between knowing where that potential perfection is and that my body can't make it there. The wabi-sabi, the place of imperfection, perfect, imperfect at the same time. That feels powerful. It feels really good.
Distinct thematic threads weave through Denevan's body of work. They often consist of a series of circles and intricate patterns, perhaps an outward expression of the cycles in nature that captivated him as a child growing up in California.
I was born in San Jose, California. Family still has a house near the beach, and so we spent the summers along the beach. And then we moved when I was 15 to Santa Cruz and just became obsessed with all the processes of the ocean, the beach and the waves and the animals and how things changed from year to year. When I was a teenager, the sea otters came back from near extinction, and I was out there counting them. Like there's 15 of them. There's only 35, and back in the late 20s, and so they came back to some degree. The brown pelicans and the positive and the negative of conditions of the ecology in the ocean from year to year, and just found that whole environment fascinating. Maybe that led to making compositions on the sand.
Another prominent theme in his work is geometry and spirals, undoubtedly influenced by his mother, a mathematician and scholar. While she navigated the responsibilities of being a mother and raising 9 children, her passion for mathematics left a lasting imprint on Denevan's artistic vision.
When my dad died when I was 5 years old, and she was raising the 9 kids by herself from 18 to 4 years old, she was able to go back to the university to study math with like the superstars of like Fibonacci numbers and try to make a little more money. I mean, that's all those kids. And so she was able to get back to, as she put it, like back to accomplishment. She skipped all kinds of grades as a child, was recognized as being like an outlier in terms of intelligence, and went to Stanford and graduated early. I went to San Jose State University, Stanford for teaching stuff, and then San Jose State, where she eventually actually taught there for many, many years.
Today, Denevan is crafting a 15-foot rendition of the number 1 in Helvetica font. Here, the pervasive influence of Jim's mother becomes evident as her influence shapes the conceptual framework of life's journey permeating the artwork.
Like seeing my mother's in her own hand writing, to see the way that she organized math on a page. There's like kind of like a vitality to the numbers, the notation, and it's just very organized. It's just hitting me as how profound that is. And numbers and math symbols and letters, they're ubiquitous, and we see them all the time, and we respond to the directions that they give, the marks on the paper. And she was able to take things from a great distance, metaphorically, in terms of solving problems, like sums and these notations. They offer the view of the world. To make a journey on a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's about a 3-mile walk per numeral for all the parts of it, because there's framing and there's outlining and stuff. So when you're on it, you can walk the whole numeral, but the layperson probably would think, I don't know where I was. I don't know what number that was, even though you make a 3-mile journey. For me, I've been doing large things long enough so that I feel it. When I make the number 1 or a 0, and I make the whole journey and the whole walk, it's like I can feel the whole thing. And I can feel the 0 versus a Helvetica 0 versus other ways of doing a 0.
Denevan will start this expansive work by sketching the numeral freehand using a hoe. He will then proceed to traverse the path with a vehicle, accentuating the curves and lines of the etching he has created in the dry lake bed.
The vehicle is a tool. I want to extend that from the initial mark making of walking along with a stick or the hoe, just scratching the ground, which has its own meditative quality, and then following the mark with the vehicle to emphasize the composition. To go from the point of the walked curve to the driven curve, compare, say, making the journey versus the Talladega Speedway. It's not the short track, which is NASCAR has a short track, which is a half mile, and then Talladega is 2 3/4 miles. So it's kind of in between. Although the number itself is 1,500 feet from bottom to top, there's also the curves, but I'm doing it twice because I'm framing the number in 2 ways. So the whole number is similar. And the speeds are similar if I was a professional driver, but I'm not. I'm just an artist with a Lexus. That's all. It'll be probably a comfortable 70 miles an hour on straightaways.
Employing a vehicle as a tool is a technique he began experimenting with over 20 years ago. This approach has enabled him to delve into the concept of perspective and the magnitude of scale.
So I was out in Burning Man in the late 90s, and I made a big drawing that, with my bottom of my foot. Pretty soon after that, I discovered, using the Google Earth History slider, that people drive across the Black Rock Playa, which is a dry lake area, and even the world speed record is from that spot. So you could see that people were going to the hot springs. They were going to explore the mountains using the area of transportation or camping, and it would leave really strong marks that would completely disappear because there'd be a new photo, and here's this. It looked pretty interesting, just all the people going to where they're going, or maybe they're having fun and they're making some turns and enjoying driving. And I was like, oh, okay, well, here's a big impermanent surface, so I can make something really large. And the first one was done all by freehand, 2.5 miles across in 2009. There was not as much use of a vehicle. I actually had the bus out there and used that to emphasize the lines. The next year I came back in 2010 and I made what's called an Apollonian gasket. It's a type of fractal. And that was done using my truck, along with mapping out this Apollonian gasket, which is within a 9-mile circumference circle. And later, my son was out there. We made a 14-mile circumference circle, which he was driving 100 miles an hour. At 100 miles an hour in a perfect circle, you wouldn't want to go 110 miles an hour. You can sort of feel like, okay, this is good. Yeah. So a 14-mile circumference circle, it's hard to even perceive that it curved. So if you get to a point of around a 20-mile circumference circle, you would perceive it being a straight line while you're going in a circle, which is a crazy thing to think about because the sizes are so extraordinarily large. And if you didn't see the mountains in the background, slowly changing, you would just be going, I'm going straight. It's a very slight circle. And this relates to my artwork really strongly. The concept of geometry and the self-similarity, like what is a circle that you can hold in your hand versus a circle that you can drive 100 miles an hour on? Those are very different.
Land art carries with it a sense of impermanence, where each piece is destined to fade away with time. For Denevan, this impermanence holds a positive significance, resonating perhaps with the ebb and flow of the changing tides and the cycles of nature he observed during his childhood on the beaches of Santa Monica. Denevan views this as nature continually presenting him with a blank canvas.
And it's a contemporary concern. Like, someone's taking up so much space. In a way, you're taking up space in a media sense. Like, the world's mediated to the extent where, gee, your letter's pretty big. But in the temporal sense of it and physical reality, it's here today, gone tomorrow. And some of the ways that has conversation with the general world is that we don't take it into account that civilizations come and go and cities come and go. And when you're in Iraq and seeing some of the earliest cities, they're basically, it's like mostly just a pile of mud, or else there's this profound effort to like, is there really something there? There's outliers like the pyramids in Egypt. That question's common about like the length of time that the artwork exists, but I've always considered it to be the signature, like, positive quality, because for one thing, the hubris involved in making extremely large things it's a little over the top. The fact that, I'm just running around the countryside making mile-long messages. I was like, the message to me is the lake is blank. There's no message on the lake. There's nothing there. That's what I see, because this surface is not anything. It's not a billboard that's above Hollywood that says Hollywood like for decades. It's like nobody's there to repair the different letters on the dry lake. So, I mean, it just softened the hubris of like making big stuff.
Denevan sees the inevitable erosion of his work over time as a poignant metaphor for the enduring resilience of life itself. It reminds us that life will continuously present us with diverse challenges, and change is an intrinsic part of the human experience. Yet amidst this perpetual flux, each moment offers the possibility of something new and transformative.
We persist in living. We move from place to place and converse and culturally engage. Wake up in the morning, we're refreshed, recharged, and we overdo it at a party, and but we persist. And in a sense, looking at the previous artworks, so the artworks that involve recognizing the day has passed, or taking a picture every day for 10 years and seeing someone age and all those kinds of things. Yes, maybe it is like a grand sort of like persistence in an environment where everything disappears. Odd thing to say is that my artwork has disappeared in the physical, visible sense. Even the recent Abu Dhabi project is no longer there. The project I did in Saudi Arabia 3 years ago, it exists, but it's beautifully eroded. And you could not say that what you saw this year was the same as 2 years ago, because it's very strongly recognizably affected by time. So I think that's really, for what I do, I love that kind of dance within the phenomena of things expiring or coming to life or coming back to life. There's a lot of flowers around the desert because it was a lot of rain last 2 years, more so than I've ever seen. So you can say that this year it's not raining or whatever. People get really obsessed with shorter time spans having to do with human needs and desires, and geologic phenomena is they really doesn't care about all those kind of there's constant changes. And 15,000 years ago was the Pleistocene, and all these dry lakes were full of water, and climate's changing from human influence. It's simultaneously true and simultaneous that human beings will persist. Bad decisions, good days, bad days.
That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, take a moment to rate and review us. It will help other listeners discover what we're doing. The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili and Caroline Goldstein. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.